Hi everyone, and welcome to Oktra's 5th LinkedIn Live. I'm David Bishop, Design Director, and have with me Sarah Edwards, who is Pre-Contracts Manager at Oktra. And our guest today is Adam Kelly, who is a Solution Leader in Workplace at Computer Centre. So in our latest Future Office series, we're going to be discussing a hot topic right now, reshaping the office for the return to work. We'll be discussing a number of different things. The different flexible working models your business can implement, the key workplace changes shaping the future office, provide answers to common workplace misunderstandings. We'll also ask, what should a business workplace strategy look like now, next, and in the future? And then we'll have time to answer some of your questions.
Thanks, Dave. So, what are the different working models? COVID-19, wow, it's impacted the way that we work and certainly accelerated some of the existing trends that we were already seeing in remote working. I think it's safe to say that a lot of us wanted more flexibility within our working environment. And now companies are trying to figure out the right balance between them and their staff. So historically, employees have wanted more flexibility, and the majority of employers had wanted their staff in the office 5 days a week, 9 to 5, eyes on everyone. And since the start of the pandemic, employers have learned, they've had to trust their employees and think about implementing more of a flexible working strategy. And what's interesting is actually in the last month, as we're seeing now this roadmap out of COVID and the return to normality, we're seeing quite a few large brands announce that they're going to be implementing different kinds of flexible working models. So we're going to discuss today 3 of those models, and Dave's going to take you through a graphic we have for each of them.
Cool, thanks, Sarah. So first one, hybrid working. While flexible working is usually referred to as an individual employee's freedom to choose a balance between home working and working from a hub workspace, this hybrid working model implements this idea across the entire business. Everyone working partially from the office and then partly remotely. And it's the most kind of commonly discussed working model right now. Companies such as Google, Microsoft, HubSpot, Salesforce, they're all implementing this hybrid working strategy. Hub and spoke is the next model, and this allows a business's employees to work from a central hub office, as well as at several other more localized workspaces. So these, whether they're regional offices, co-working spaces, or home offices. Occasionally there might be important events held at the main hub, but mostly people will work in their own environments, their local environments. This hub and spoke model works with national companies and provides greater flexibility. So people who don't want to have to commute into a single office space every day, it ensures that that makes their kind of traveling life easier and a less commute potentially. But also there's still a central space, the main hub, that employees can identify with and build their company culture. And then the last model, distributed model, this works in the same way as the classic hybrid working model, but it takes the idea of remote working at an individual level and applies it across the whole business, meaning that all the employees work from a range of environments, including home offices, co-working spaces, but without the central hub. And it's been suggested that in future employees could be offered membership to these co-working spaces as part of their contracts, which would be good for harnessing the best of global talent, but potentially it means company culture and collaboration could suffer. Companies such as Coinbase, Dropbox, Twitter, Shopify, they're implementing a fully remote working strategy or work from anywhere strategy at the moment. Adam, have you seen what have you seen your clients do?
Yeah, thanks, David. So hybrid working, as you say, is probably the one we're having most conversations about. Taking the positives people have enjoyed from working from home with the need to be around other people. It seems to be the kind of generally accepted view of what the future of work looks like. The hub and spoke model is very interesting. Organizations with large central city locations are considering, how to revitalize their regional offices to offer people greater flexibility and choice of where they work. And we've seen, financial organizations that are looking at their branch strategies and considering co-locating staff there and creating hybrid offices. With the distributed model, as you mentioned, it's hard to retain that sense of culture. But for some personas, that might not be so much of a problem. Contact centers that don't have a high requirement for collaboration get access to a broader talent pool if you're not having to get people to one location. And I think that's really key, that we shouldn't be thinking of these models in isolation, as organizations have multiple work styles and personas that would each benefit from these models in different ways.
Thanks, Adam. It's interesting to hear about the stuff that you're seeing. So like with any kind of new model, you have to look at the pros and cons, right? So just to touch base really on the pros and the cons of a flexible working model. Some of the pros obviously are reduced cost of operation for employees, but equally not just cost benefits to the employers. Sorry, the employees can have reduced cost of their operation. So reduced commuter costs, which is great. I know I'm benefiting from that, which is great. Improvements to work-life balances, so being able to kind of work in your own way at your own times. And then equally, I suppose those kind of pros can be used again as a recruiting tool themselves. So you can offer to your staff, we offer this flexible way of working, and it can be seen as quite attractive for staff retention and staff attractment. Also, we're seeing kind of productivity boosts. Actually, I think everyone thought productivity would take a massive hit, but actually it's massively boosted in quite a lot of sectors. Again, like I said, staff can work their flexible hours. So if you're a night owl, a bit like me, you can work those late hours, and you wouldn't necessarily be able to do that in the city because you'd be thinking, I've got to get back to the home. Some of the cons are, I would say, they're probably more attributable to solely working from home. So we are seeing kind of diminished client and employee experiences, increased employee isolation, and that feeling of like more work, less culture, and less collaboration. But something that perhaps people might not necessarily think of is a heightened risk of cyber threats, and I think employees are sometimes gauging it. It's quite difficult to gauge productivity of the staff whilst they can't actually physically see them. But I think at the end of the day, it's going to take some time to figure out which strategy works for your business and to understand the right balance between employees and employers, flexibility. I'd say that the key to flexible work is establishing a strategy that provides and utilizes the right communications technology. So enabling fast, secure exchange of information and collaboration between employees. But I think it's safe to say that technology just can't beat human interaction. I think lastly as well, it's also going to be really important to continuously evaluate these flexible working models as you're kind of moving through this future period, because they might not work for all employers and staff alike. Remember that the majority of the last year that we've seen has had like many different layers of restrictions on everyone's lives and everyone's businesses. So shops and restaurants, and most importantly really schools being closed up until a couple of weeks ago. I think once the world and more specifically the UK opens up and gets back to that sense of normality, I think that we'll see quite a lot of those cons falling away.
Yeah, agreed. And I think that leads us neatly onto the next question: what's changing in the workplace? So those points that you mentioned, Sarah, we can kind of look at and analyze. We're all familiar with the changes to our lives that have been brought about by COVID, and it's kind of ever changing and evolving. But potentially what's not sunk in fully yet is the extent to which the world of work has permanently changed for employers and employees. And we've got a graphic here, I think, wanted to discuss kind of what we see as the 5 major changes. Starting with flexibility, we touched on it earlier on, but flexible working has accelerated more than ever in the last year. There'll be more flexible use of workspace, agile working, more environmental variety, and future-proofing of office space. Generation Z are entering the employee market into a remote and flexible world, and businesses will need to adapt to attract and retain this future talent. But also, not only we think employees need to be flexible with their working strategies, but also flexible with their business operation strategies in order to adapt to this future change. Second point, well-being. So before the pandemic, many of us kind of struggled with a work-life balance. So potentially, commuting to and from the office 5 days a week. And in some ways, there's now a feeling it's been rebalanced. But the kind of knock-on effect, remote working has seen a rise in other well-being challenges. So burnout, isolation, loneliness. So culture is kind of constantly shifting around discussions of employee well-being and mental health. And the pandemic has brought around the importance of people's well-being and brought it to the fore, which is a good thing. And we see that we need to take this and reflect this in design as a way of supporting people in their return to work. So therefore, workplace designers will need to bring the best elements of the home or from the home into the office through kind of improved amenity spaces and by incorporating domestic design touches that can improve and enhance employee well-being. So these might be considerations of noise, light, ventilation, use of natural materials, calming colour palettes, biophilia, soft furnishings, and potentially separate rooms dedicated to well-being or mindfulness practices.
Thanks. Yeah, I agree a lot with everything you've just said. It's quite relatable for sure. Another really important point, thirdly, is health and safety, of course. Keeping your employees safe at work is hugely important to the success of your business. Knowing that their health is being prioritized means that employees feel supported, and it helps to ease their anxieties around the return to work. So I think that a lot of the changes will be behavioral changes, things that we're used to already. They're pretty much ingrained in our normal way of life now, but they're generally based around a sense of collective responsibility. But we are finding that, well, I wanted to just touch base really on a couple of things that business can build COVID conscious design into their workspaces. And this is some of the stuff that we're doing with our clients. So there's a few obvious ones in here. Social distancing, obviously, flow management, but just you'd be surprised the effectiveness of just, considered wayfinding really within a space. Hygiene, so practicing hand washing and potentially even getting a dedicated cleaner to clean those high traffic areas and touch points. Looking at furniture solutions and divider screens, having PPE readily available. But what we're really trying to do is look into incorporating antimicrobial materials and surfaces, and such as copper or stainless steel, for example, and just looking at everything, making sure that it's easily wipeable. We're not putting forward things that might collect, bacteria very easily. But from a building services perspective, also looking to improve your ventilation system. So increasing the fresh air, so maybe putting in a new air handling unit, or if you can, boosting that fresh air if the landlord hasn't done already. Also, you could look at introducing UV filters into ductwork and thermal imaging. So they're the kind of key things around health and safety. The fourth point is technology. Technology is a fundamental part of the way that we work, especially now in the age of remote and flexible working. Enabling us to collaborate effectively and reducing that affinity distance between co-workers is really important, and technology will support all aspects of the future office. And I'm going to let Adam talk about tech in the workplace really, and what the future holds.
Thanks, Sarah. So we've enabled people to work at home, very successfully. That focus is now shifting on enabling everyone to work how and where they want. Having security built into that protects them and the organization. And if we do that in a way that doesn't impede that user experience, then people don't try and find ways around it and cause problems. When we do return to the office, meetings are going to become slightly more complicated as we have to support people on site and people connecting remotely. And we need to think about video enabling those collaboration spaces and integrating the platforms that we've got used to over the last year with the ones that we might have already have investments in. We're starting to see a real interest in mixed reality, and that's really taking off as people are looking to understand the impact it could have in their business around collaboration and the use cases that they could apply it to. We're also seeing a real trend in making buildings smarter. So linking the systems that control our buildings together and utilizing that data to drive informed decisions and automate responses. So thinking about health and safety and environments we're going back to, so measuring and controlling air quality, showing people how clean those spaces are, will help ease anxieties around returning to the office. Putting intelligence into how they are heated, cooled and lit obviously has benefits around sustainability and cost savings. Occupancy and usage data can also help direct real estate strategy and give us insight into how the spaces are being used. And while this has long been standard in new buildings, we're now seeing this being retrofitted into existing ones.
Cool, thanks, Adam. There's one last point, last but not least, community, culture and collaboration. So our social capital. It's not really surprising that we kind of feel nostalgic for elements and the kind of almost the mundane facets of previous office life, such as grabbing a coffee from the coffee machine, taking some time out in the breakout area, banter with colleagues, but also things like Friday drinks. These elements contribute to office life, and it makes it kind of meaningful for many people, but also helps sustain a good organizational culture. And we almost took them for granted previously, and they kind of underpinned how people work together. But it's harder to kind of feel and maintain that kind of level of, or almost serendipity, but also those moments where chance meetings happen. It's difficult to do that when you're crouched at the kitchen table, homeschooling, dealing with cats, dogs running around barking, deliveries at the door, but also growing exhausted with a constant stream of video conference meetings. So it's difficult to build that culture remotely. The office is also part of this social capital. It's a tool to build culture, and also community and collaboration. So I think the office can really assist in providing a sense of belonging for staff, which becomes a huge factor in building community and culture. And then add new technology into that can contribute to social capital also, both remotely but also within the office environment.
Yeah, definitely, David. So the other side of smart buildings is the workspace app. So once you control the systems within a building, you can expose that functionality, and your smartphone becomes the key to it. So you can book meeting rooms and desk space. You can see where your colleagues are working on a given day. Get alerted to travel issues before you leave home, and understand that you'll need to rearrange meetings, and maybe everyone then works remotely that day. You can use your phone to gain contactless entry to a building and utilize wayfinding to navigate around unfamiliar offices. And from that social capital and culture side, you can build in within that app a sense of community through advertising local businesses and events and things like that.
There's an interesting point. Google recently said that hybrid working will increase costs, and potentially impact its corporate culture. And that's kind of a quote taken from the K10 report. But also we've heard the CEO of Goldman Sachs, he said, our people do their best when they forge close bonds with their colleagues. We found the best way is to work together in person on a regular basis. Adam, I think you've got a comment on this quote.
Yeah, so Goldman Sachs CEO David Solomon made the headlines and somewhat bucked the trends of other CEOs by saying or calling remote working an abhorrence. He was talking about concerns over innovation, collaboration, and their apprenticeship culture, and how that had struggled over the past year. And I get that. Computer Center has, you know, a big apprenticeship culture, and integrating people is difficult when you're all remote. Now, if he's saying that he wants everyone to work from the office all of the time, I think that's a very different proposition. But it clearly sets out the culture of the company, and then, you know, that is then for people to decide if that's how they want to work.
Definitely interesting. Going to go on to the next topic now. So some common workplace misunderstandings, or, you know, we're just going to debunk some of those, if you like. So firstly, is the office dead? So $1 million question at the moment. Despite an overall very successful shift to flexible working and remote working, people still miss their workplace. They miss their interactions with colleagues, whether it's informal or structured collaboration and in-person meetings. More than that, and I know this through the countless Zooms I've had with my family and my friends, they miss having a space that's dedicated just to their work, designed for their work, and home office setups are kind of rarely ergonomic, and the home can also provide many distractions, as Dave just mentioned previously. And you could also have things like poor connectivity. I'm sure everyone listening to this live stream has experienced all of those things, which can be a bit annoying. But technology can do amazing things to bridge that physical distance. But at the end of the day, in my opinion, nothing beats face-to-face interaction, and it's probably personally what I crave the most. And I think that this past year has actually provided, if you think about it optimistically, it's provided an opportunity really for the whole world to kind of just stop, pause, think, evaluate, and evolve really on so many different levels, which is actually, it's really exciting. I think the office might not ever be what it used to be for all of us. I think it will definitely be different, but I don't think that it will cease to exist for everyone. I think it plays too much of a big part in building and supporting company culture, and the face-to-face collaboration that you get is ultimately the most important thing is the social setting, really.
Good points, Sarah. Good points. The next question. So we talked about, is the office dead? No. Is the desk dead? Potentially. I think if I just talk a bit more about this point, I think in all offices we're seeing a trend towards fewer desks, but with more collaboration spaces. And I think this pandemic has accelerated that. We believe in offering, and I think most people want a choice for within the work setting to carry out to tailored to the task that they need to complete. So not all people will use the office as a place to sit down at a desk and get their head down to work. A few organizations we mentioned earlier, they will work fully remotely, using the office for meetings, training, collaboration only. Factor in desk booking and desk sharing. That's a big part, and is often a part of people's return to work office strategy. So the idea of having a dedicated desk, I can see that as becoming a thing of the past. And then in the main, we've moved away from that worker-bee concept of having rows and rows of fixed desks, kind of call center style. For some, the desk is already dead, because with latest technology, it is possible to work anywhere. But obviously, and I think I mentioned it earlier, so did Sarah, we need to consider ergonomics. So working at the kitchen table all day with a poor chair and a screen height is bad for posture and health generally. So whether that's in the office or at home, we've got to consider that.
Yeah, I agree. Sat here in my dining room chair at the moment with a dedicated office, so I completely get that. Another one of the questions we've got here is, do we need to spend a lot of money to make the office COVID secure? In short, no, you don't. You can spend as little or a lot really, and I think that depends on a couple of things that have big influences on that. So, you know, any internal policies that you have, and also other factors like perhaps trade union influences. And we've had that recently with a client who stipulated certain changes had to be made. But I would say management of the space is the key, really. It ultimately depends on the size of your space. You know, if you've got a whole building or a floor, just one floor in an office 4,000 square foot or something. But really, I would just say sticking to good practices, so social distancing, hand washing, things like that. But more importantly, is trusting and respecting your colleagues as a starting point, really, I would say.
Cool. So that moves us on to the next question. I think we've got a slide to support this. So we're going to discuss the now, the next, and the future. I'll talk about the now, which is kind of understanding changing space requirements. So really, this is about how companies can plan for the future. So potentially consider kind of physical layouts. So how you work, how you're going to potentially use the space, what the layout of the office could be. Consider the tasks and how that can affect building the brief, but also behavioural changes, how people are going to use the space. Develop steering committees and hold workshops. Canvass your staff for their opinions on tools on how to assist their working practices. For example, when we moved office last year during the pandemic, we kind of developed these committees, but also undertook a series of surveys. So we really kind of drilled down into the whole kind of variety of departments and what they needed and required. So building up kind of a platform and a series of kind of data and information that can help optimize the future workspace.
So the next, Adam, I hope you've got your crystal ball out for the future part, but the next is really working and deciding on what model that fits your business. So, you know, those three models that we discussed at the beginning, and the fact that going back to the fact that, you know, it's going to take some time to consider them all and see which one works for you. That's what you need to be doing next, really, and developing that plan for introducing that to your staff, really. But what's really important, again, is just communication with your employees. So again, when people are working from home and they feel distance, you know, it's really important to make sure that staff know what's going on. Again, like I'm saying, I said before, to ease anxieties and just keep people in the loop, so they know what to expect, really, I would say. So Adam, I'll hand over to you for the future.
Thank you, Sarah. So if this wasn't being recorded, this would be easy. But if I caveat it by saying there's obviously uncertainty about what the future holds, then I think that's fine. So maintaining flexibility is obviously key to this. Monitoring business performance, you know, through KPIs, so you can make required updates or adjustments to ways of working or workspaces based on that data, you know, means that you can flex and change, and things aren't set in stone. You need to adjust an operating model as well to suit the evolving needs of the business, you know, and employees. A distributed workforce, if that's, and it looks like, you know, that's the model that from now kind of going forward will be supporting, requires, you know, a different approach to how you support that. If people are working flexible hours and working their own hours, then how you support that needs to evolve and grow. We need to think about different skills in managing and motivating people. You know, there's definitely an HR side to this, but I think basically if the approach you put in is agile enough, then you can cope with what the future brings.
Cool, good answer, Adam. So I think we're coming to the end of this LinkedIn Live. So, but we have got time to answer a couple of questions. First one is fully remote working sustainable? Sarah, do you want to I'll put you on the spot. Sarah, you're on mute.
Oh my God, I didn't think I would have to do that. Sorry. Right, so I would say really for the majority of people, I don't think that it is, but for some, yes, for some people, of course it is. People have been, some people, freelancers, might have been working fully from home throughout their working career. So I think it is possible, especially if you've got the setup available at home. But I would say that I think remote working is definitely a healthy option and a good recruitment tool to offer staff on a flexible basis.
Yeah, I agree. I think on this question, I think we mentioned some companies earlier who are already using the distributed model, and their plan is to keep everyone working remotely and using the occasional kind of office for meetings and collaboration. So I think, yeah, definitely for some it is sustainable, and it can be.
Yeah, I'll just add, I think, yeah, technically yes, we've proved that, but from my own experience, it's felt very much like living at work rather than working at home and desperate to get back to an office.
Me too.
Agreed. I think we've got time for one more question. So will companies continue to have their own workspace or shift to co-working / serviced offices?
Okay, I'll check. Yeah, okay, I'll go for that. I think that we will probably see a boost in the uptake of co-working and service offices. I think ultimately, though, companies will kind of always want to have their own home to kind of make their mark and breed their own brand culture. I think co-working is great, but I don't think it works effectively for everyone, but it definitely does work effectively for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I can see co-working continuing to grow because it has obvious benefits in terms of scale. So whether it's a singular desk or 2 desks, and it gives the flexibility to grow quite quickly as well. And it's quite efficient in terms of cost, but also you have the kind of collaboration benefits as well. So I think I think it will definitely continue to grow. But I agree with you, Sarah. Some companies will, and probably the larger companies, will benefit from having their own identity with their own attributed to their own office, so therefore a bigger presence. So that I think will continue to be a big factor.
Yeah, I think that's why in our customer base, I don't see co-working being particularly attractive, but once we understand who's coming back, how often, and to where, I think serviced offices could be very interesting, especially where you have leases coming up or you don't own buildings.
Cool stuff. I think that's all we have time for now. So thanks for watching, everybody. If you've got any further questions, then please email the link that's just come up on this screen. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.